Good evening. This is the Athens City Shade Tree Commission meeting for March 11th, 2021. We have some people who are joining us this evening, David Riggs, can you do some introductions, or how do we want to handle this?
Good evening, everybody. This is David Riggs. We did invite some of the WODA folks, Ann Little, Chuck Garvik, I know I see them on here, and Tom Simmons. Those are all going to be representing the two site plans that we have for review tonight.
Okay, very good. We'll get on to those in a few minutes. We've got a couple of tree permit issues to discuss before we get to that. Let me just share my screen with the agenda on it. That should be this one here. So we've got, we had a request from the Garden Club about the possibility for removal of two crabapple trees at the Johnny Appleseed Park and their possible replacement. It's not clear to me who would be paying for their replacement. I think at least one of the ones that I looked at is in fairly serious decline. And I think some others did actually go and have a look at this site. So I don't know what comments people want to make on these two. I'm not ready to approve this yet, but I'm almost there. I just need to figure out who's going to pay for the replacements if we are going to replace them.
David, I agree. I think both of those trees are in decline. I think that one is more in decline than the other, having significant structural issues. The other one also has water spouts. So I wouldn't be adverse to having them replaced. I agree. We need to find out who is replacing them. There is a concern, if they are replaced, how will they be replaced without significant deer damage if they want to replace them with apple trees?
So who's in charge of that area?
It's the Garden Club.
No. Do they just do the plantings, or do they have some sort of oversight for the area? I mean, is it a city park, or who?
It's a city park, and the Garden Club maintain the plants there. I don't think they do anything with the trees because in the past they've asked us to deal with some pruning of some of the trees on that site.
They probably aren't going to want to pay for it.
I don't know. I haven't spoken to, I think it was Margaret Murray was the person who asked about this. And the first thing I wanted to do was just establish, yes, Margaret Murray asked this, and it just has the request being made on behalf of the Athens Garden Club, who maintain the park. The club believes that 2 of the 3 crabapple trees at the park have been in decline for at least 5 years, and it's time for them to be removed and replaced.
Well, I guess what I'm asking is there someone here that is our contact with the city?
Well, no, I will have to talk to Andrew Jicky about a possible replacement, but it would be the city that would remove these trees. So
you're going to go ahead and do it with him? Okay.
Well, I would consult with him if the general agreement is that these trees should be removed.
So you want the rest of us to go take a look? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I sent out an email asking people if they could go and have a look about this. There's no great hurry. I mean, but I suspect, and I should probably try and contact Margaret Murray and find out if this is the case. But I suspect they would like them to be removed before they start doing their plantings for this year.
Yeah, I missed the email. My electronics have been giving me in lately.
Mm-hmm.
My emails have working on one or the other of mine always.
David, go ahead.
They do have fundraisers, the garden club, and so we should probably make sure that they, don't have plans for funding the replacement of the trees. Maybe they could buy the trees, but whatever. But they might have a plan to do that.
Okay, but I might be wrong. That's beyond our purview. Our purview is to say whether or not we believe that those trees are in decline and should be removed.
Correct.
That's your purview. Our purview.
But we're trying to maintain tree canopy. And so one of our goals is if we're going to take down trees, we'd like to see that they're replaced, but the permit is asking whether or not we can approve they're being taken down.
Yeah, and replaced. So, I mean, I don't have any problems with replacement there. It's a case of who's going to pay for it, I think is the question. And that needs to be established. Either I or Andrew Cheeky are going to have to call Margaret Murray and ask her whether the garden club thinks it's going to replace them or whether the city should replace them. Okay. So,
David, do you need us to have a motion that Andrew talk with Margaret and that we will approve the removal if they can figure out who will replace those trees?
Well, first of all, I want to make sure that the people who would like to go and see the trees have actually had a chance to see them. As I said, we don't have to approve it this evening.
Got it.
I'm just trying to figure out if anybody else is going to be wanting to go and see these trees, or if they're willing to accept your view and my view that they should be replaced.
Oh, are we the only two? Has anybody else gone and looked at them?
Don't think so, no.
I'll go look.
Okay, thank you, Nancy.
I'm familiar with those trees, and they are aging out, and I would approve their being removed, and I would like to see some kind of replacement as well, but they are in decline.
Well, let's give Nancy a chance to go and have a look at it, and I'll circulate an email.
Well, the three of you have seen it already.
Yes.
And
I'd like to make one more note, if it's appropriate.
I actually am, but I'm under John White.
I would like the city to examine the other trees for maintenance pruning.
So I don't know. I am. Yes.
David.
I'm sorry, Ryan. If you can hear it, there's way too much noise in the background on this call. I can't. We need to have some control over the sound. Okay. We're still getting echoes somehow in this, and I don't think it's me. Okay, I think it's quieting down now.
Meanwhile, David, this is Nancy.
Yes.
Please go ahead. Three of you seem to have seen enough.
Okay.
It's obvious, apparently.
Okay. So if there's a general consensus, then that we'll recommend that they are removed, and I'll work with Andrew Chicky on how they're going to be replaced. And I think, Roxanne, you wanted a more general review of the trees on that site.
Yes, please.
Yeah. So if that is the general consensus, we'll see what we can do about getting a review of those trees. When I visited the site, there is an evergreen that's been trimmed, to put it politely, by Asplund, the AEP contractor, to keep it clear of some high voltage cables at the rear of the park. And there's a yew tree there that looks as if it's doing quite fine. Then there's the third crabapple that appears to be okay. So I'll ask. It'll probably have to be Ann Bonner who looks at these at some point.
I'm here. I'm happy to do that.
Oh, hi, Anne. I didn't see you join it. Yep.
I apologize.
It's all right.
I'm happy to assess. You want me to inspect those?
Well, yeah. I think the consensus, and if you heard it, is that there are two crab apples on the east side of the park.
Yeah.
That are in serious decline.
I heard it all.
Okay, good. Well, if you've heard it all, then if you can just go and have a look at the other trees and just and see.
I will do it.
And see.
It'll be next week.
That's fine. That's fine. Okay. So I think we've got that one squared away. The other two that I've got on this list for tonight are both on Elmwood. There's at 55 Elmwood, we've got 2 Bradford Pears. They're quite large trees. I didn't see anything particularly wrong with them, although I think, Roxanne, you visited this site and did confirm there is quite a split in one of them. I don't know if you want to add anything to this.
Okay, so I think 2 of us actually observed the split. When I put my hand down into the split, I didn't feel any significant rot, but as you know, Bradford pears are prone to splitting, and the owner, with whom I spoke briefly, would consider cabling if that is recommended at her expense. In 2007, she did have both trees pruned. They did an excellent job, I thought. It probably is time for a little bit of maintenance pruning. She was concerned, or her neighbors, I should say, were concerned about the overhang in the streets. I didn't see any potential issues right now. I'd be in favor of allowing her to have some maintenance pruning and to have somebody look to see whether or not cabling, is the appropriate thing to do. I didn't think it was at this time, but others might have other opinions.
Okay, I would agree on the state of the branches. I didn't think that they were a hazard, and that some pruning would probably be sufficient. Anne, are you familiar with these trees at all?
I apologize. I've been on vacation this week.
That's all right.
I just saw this email. Is this the one? Are these the 2 trees that are on the corner?
Yeah, the corner of Elmwood and Watt. Yeah.
Yeah. I know them. Pear trees, they're unpredictable. Mm-hmm. These have been very well maintained, and both by the city and I think by the current property owner as well as the property owner before. I would not recommend, I agree with you, Roxanne, I wouldn't recommend cabling a pear. It's going to be painful to remove them, but probably the progressive thing to do would be remove and replace. It is going to be a tough area to put new trees into because the house is kind of close and it's a little bit of a narrow lot, but they're not going to fall over on a weekday between 9 and 5.
Well, I think though that what the owner is asking us, Anne, is whether or not we will give her permission to bring in her pruners again.
Oh.
So she's not asking to remove them. She actually wants to continue to care for them.
Mm-hmm. And there's multiple stems and some of them are okay. So I don't think the tree needs to be removed either. I was a little concerned about the branch that overhung into the street, which the homeowner did mention as a concern. And the reason I'm concerned about it, although it looks healthy, but it has a very wide crotch angle, which I believe, and you could tell me the truth here, is more prone to split, and it goes totally over the street.
The thing, I've seen a lot of pears like that, and the ones that get pruned out early, trained early on, they can really last.
Okay.
Amazing specimens in Chillicothe that are very similar to those, and I'm always shocked that despite the ice loads and all that, and that's a pretty protected site right there on Watt. So if she's willing to do that, and again, I haven't visited them this year. I saw them last year. You know, a good arborist, and she must have a relationship with one. They have an obligation to tell her the truth. And if there truly are structural issues with these, I'm sure that person would tell her. And if she's willing to incur the cost, seems really reasonable.
Yeah, I would approve the homeowner
Okay.
looking at that.
I'm fine with that too.
Yeah, I think it's really important for us to, we really want to increase our tree inventory. So I am loath to even really consider taking out trees that are not hazardous at this time, and really encouraging people to keep it. Even if you put a new tree immediately right in there, it takes years and years before it'll have the benefits of the tree as it is now. So
I agree. Okay, so I think the consensus is that we will give the owner the permission to have the trees pruned professionally. Good. I've got another one on Elmwood. This 69 Elmwood Place, so a little bit further down Elmwood. It was listed as an elm and a maple. The elm has lots of bark falling off it, apparently. And the owner is concerned about whether it's dying or not. And I think he's asking for permission to trim one limb off the maple that's there. And I think the maple is a bit of a straggly looking tree, if it's the one I saw.
It is, David.
Yeah.
So I spoke to the owner, and this person, by their own admission, is an A-type personality who doesn't like falling branches.
Yep.
And one of the things that I noted is that when he was showing me that bark was coming off, was that he was actually taking pieces off, which has me slightly concerned because the tree is actually quite intact. Okay. So when we're talking about the elm tree, I did not see that it had any significant issues. However, I would suggest that we go back and we do look at it when it's in leaf, because what he was saying is that some of the branches are showing dieback. Yep. In the upper story. And I don't know if that could have been due to cicadas a couple years ago. But I realize that sometimes you have to take into account the personality of the owner, I would imagine. And this is definitely an owner who, cares, certainly, but definitely wants things to be a certain way. Now, they are not interested in paying for the pruning. So it would be up to the city at some point in the future to make that determination. But from what I could tell at this point, the tree seems to actually be in good health. I didn't see any insect damage. I didn't see any disease, but I'd like to see the tree in leaf. For the maple tree, there is a branch that goes directly over the sidewalk. It obviously does have insect damage, as well as potentially mechanical damage. And he is proposing to cut that limb himself. It's approximately 4 inches in diameter. When he spoke to me, he talked about the 2-cut method, removing weight on the first cut, then, going towards the collar in the second cut. He did seem to know what he was talking about. So I think I would have a comfort if he wanted to do it. It's not too far off the ground. However, as David said, this tree is absolutely in decline. It already has had its leader cut out. I don't know why, but that has caused the tree some stress.
Looks like an old topping from AEP or whoever was in there. I agree with Roxanne completely. The elm, to me, looked fairly healthy, but it would be very interesting just to wait until it leaves out and see what's see what's dead up there, if anything. But I think the bark it's so mature and it's so old, it's just getting a little bit shaggy. It's a very nice tree, the elm.
Okay.
I would say that for the neighborhood, if you ever wanted to put some money into a tree to save in the future, not that it needs it now, this would be one of those that you would absolutely want to save as a centerpiece for the neighborhood. It's beautiful.
Okay. Good.
Is it by chance one of the last of the original elms from Elmwood? There were a few.
It looks like that age.
Yes.
Yeah, it could very well be.
Sometimes that can be something to change the mind of the homeowner, to give them a different way of looking at it.
I have a question to ask about. In general, what is our position on approving people to cut down to do their own trimming like that?
I'm happy to do it, to let people do it if we think that they are capable of doing it. Otherwise, we're into adding costs to the city.
If it's a city tree, does the city have any responsibility if things go awry? Do they have any? Can anybody sue them because it's a city tree and we gave permission for it to be done?
I don't believe so.
Okay. That's good. It just crossed my mind.
That's what I was thinking, that it might not be a good idea. But
yeah, if there's any liability. So.
But I'm glad we can save the elm. That would be great.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so Roxanne, by the sound of it, you felt that he could probably handle the pruning himself. Okay.
I do, and I would also tell him exactly what Ann says. This might be one of the original elms. The city, wants to continue to monitor this, and we're committed to providing resources if needed. I think that will help this particular owner in this particular situation.
Okay, good. Okay, I think we've dealt with all those Title 33 issues. Unless there's anything else, we'll move on to Title 37, which is the landscape ordinance issues. I have just received some new plans for this area, and I've not had chance to look at it. So with that stated, I don't know which person is going to lead off the presentation or request to us from our.
My name is Mark Schieber. I'm a landscape architect. Are you referring in reference to Tyler Park Apartments and?
Yes, Tyler
Kershaw.
Park and Kershaw Greens, yeah.
I am here as a representative with, I believe Ann Little's here also, Chuck Garvick, Joe Burning. Unfortunately, I'm under the name John White. I have no idea why. For the record, my name is Mark Schieber, and I am a registered landscape architect, state of Ohio.
Okay, good. What can you tell us about this latest version of the plans and how it differs from the earlier version?
The major difference of it is that there was a shift in the building layout. The final form of the architectural site plan had not been articulated on the plan. What it did is it had very minor changes in relationship to the number of tree counts that were on site as opposed to being purchased. I think and I'm not looking directly at the numbers, but I think Tyler was pretty close to the same basic numbers, whereas Kershaw, I think we ended up purchasing about 5 more. So the differences in the computations, all the computations have been figured and shown on your chart there. for the shade tree requirements.
Let
And
me
your
see if
local-
I'm going to try and bring up one of these onto the screen so that we
Okay.
can see what we're doing. Which one would you like to do?
Oh, let's do Tyler.
Okay. Let me try and share that one. And I may have to increase the magnification on this because, let me try that. Okay. So can people see this drawing on my screen? As I say, I can boost the magnification of this because you probably can't.
If you could make it bigger, it would help. There you go. Thank you.
It won't all fit on now, but let's move down to this bottom section here where we've got the buildings concentrated.
David, can I ask a clarification?
Sure.
When we have the bank trees, do medium trees count as 2 medium trees equals 1 large tree?
Well, the banked trees, unless the owner of the property is going to be planting these for the city, would be large shade trees.
No, I'm sorry. When you calculate the number of bank trees, is it the number of trees calculated minus the number of large trees minus the number of medium trees divided by 2?
Yeah.
Okay, then the calculations that have been done have not taken that into account, at least in the original formula. So you might want to take that into account, Mark.
Okay.
That will help decrease the number of trees that you need to bank. And the 2 types of trees that I think that we consider medium trees are the sweet bay magnolia as well as the American hop hornbeam.
I believe those are small trees.
They seem to have, the sweet bay seem to have met under both categories.
Yeah, no, they're listed under medium on our
Yeah.
list.
Yeah, I think it may depend on the particular species that you get.
I looked at the species, David. They're listed under medium. Now they might be co-listed too under small,
Yeah.
but
I believe that, we ran into that confusion at first and found it.
just give us the biggest medium trees you can.
There you go.
There's another issue that I think I did not understand, Mark.
Yes.
When we're dealing with Tyler, on the plat map, it seems to say 4.65 acres.
Uh-huh.
And so when I figure out the total square footage from that, easy calculation, it does not equal your impermeable plus permeable. You are off by quite a bit in your number. So we need that to be explained.
So what we did, and as David Riggs, I believe, is with us, and can you hear me all right, David, and correct me if I've misquoted anything here, we figured the total site. We then figured both our permeable and impermeable outside of the right-of-way. And so then the right-of-way is the balance of the difference of that figure that you're looking for that makes up the 4.5 acres.
Okay, so somewhere on the paperwork, we need that to be shown to us, the total acreage minus the right-of-way acreage equals X acreage. And what we're going to do is make sure that when we do the calculations, everything adds up.
So the new...
I was just going to say another thing is that I'd like for you to maybe talk to us about the right-of-way, because there are, and David Ingram, correct me if I'm wrong, some right-of-ways have to still be included in the calculation and some do not.
Yeah,
We need some clarification there, right?
Yeah. the concern I'd got was that if this is your property, then my expectation is that you've granted or somebody's granted an easement across your property for a street or whatever purpose. And unless that easement is also an easement for the city to plant trees, then it would be your obligation to plant trees on that land. But I could be wrong on that one. That's a David Riggs question.
If I could just step in here for a second, committee, I've asked, one of our comments to the whole team doing this project was for them to dedicate the right of way to the city of Athens. So they'll actually take that out. So when they resubmit their plans, they'll actually give us a plat of right of way. Just makes it more clear for the city to know where the right of way is. Maintenance right now, it's considered a prescriptive easement.
Yes.
So they actually own to the center of the road, but they can't do anything with it except pay taxes on it. So we've asked them to dedicate that property to the city of Athens as public right of way.
Okay, great. So in the revised paperwork, Mark, just make sure that you can give the total acreage, but just tell us what the easement is, so that way we know to take it out of our calculations for the trees.
Roxanne, if I may, the plan which you just got, which David got and David Ingrid was questioning, that newer plan, if anybody has a copy of it, if you look at that, the property square footage calculations is the first item in the first block, and you will note that the total property square footage is listed.
Yes.
And then the property square footage within the right of way is actually listed there. And then the property square footage that is not included. So
so it's there.
So it's now there in answer to what I was told earlier this week. So we wanted to make sure that we had that there for you.
Okay.
To make
And I would just once again remind you too that your medium trees will count. 2 medium trees equals 1 large tree, so your banking might be different now.
Okay, we will review that. I'll have to double check. I can't recall exactly. I had someone else working on that, and I don't remember what we talked about it, but I don't remember how that calculation came about there exactly. So,
I would like to say that I really like the diversity of trees that you've chosen.
I wanted to mention that.
Yes, and they're very good for that site. So that's really good to see the diversity and the proper trees for the location.
Yes.
Thank you.
And
one of the questions I've got for you is why are we having to bank trees for this site?
Good question.
So the reason we are banking trees for this site is that a combination of the standards of requirement for tree sizes and their distance of separation starts to get quite a bit of coverage on our site. And there are areas that we wanted to leave as open fields towards the back on the sort of south western corner. That field is meant to be an open recreation area. And so we still have trees in there, but yet we didn't create an orchard of trees, which is what it would have taken on the 30-foot centers. So we tried to use a good balance between what made sense to use on the site and then take and bank the others. We have a couple spaces that are open along the parking lot edge, which are for the ease of snow plowing and movement, and so that we don't end up with oversalted or packed trees from the operational issues that go on in maintaining the parking lot. But other than that, we've tried to put them in there pretty thoroughly within the standards. So the balance is how we ended up banking trees.
David,
I have a
go ahead.
I have a question. Are you there? I drove by there the other day. I didn't get out and walk it, but there are a number of existing trees in the creek area, the woodland in the creek area. Is any of that on your property? Because you can count existing trees that you're going to leave every 30 feet. You can count a tree.
We looked at trying to preserve a number of those, but there's a lot of grading that is occurring back in the back there, which is going to impact the number of those existing trees. And
Got it.
so we just didn't want to take the risk in our counts relative to it.
Okay, but it's possible they may remain. There may be a few.
Indeed. So they would just be an added benefit to what is added there, which in truth would be able to reduce the banking amount of trees. Would that be something that, as the site is being completed and that banking number is being reviewed, that it might impact their ability to lessen the banking, or is that a preconceived notion at this point in time?
I'm not sure.
I would say that's
Keeping
sorry.
a tree would be great. Keeping a tree would be a real positive.
Yeah.
So I think it's good.
But we have to remember that trees don't tell us, it could take a while for them to show effects of the construction damage. And by then,
We may not know for 2 or 3 years afterwards whether or not
5
that
or
tree's
7.
going to survive. Thanks, Ann.
One of the things probably we should mention is that there are things you can do to protect the trees if you're going to try and save them.
You have to keep well away from the tree with the construction.
Yeah, you wanted to try and protect them out to the drip line if you're going to protect them at all.
But I think that the fundamental question that maybe Mark is asking is that if he says that he's going to bank 20 trees and it turns out that they end up planting, a couple of extra trees, for example, would we allow him or them then to count that they have planted additional trees and therefore they don't have to bank as many? Is there a post review after we approve a plan?
Well, the only post review after we've approved a plan is that when we go to the site and look at it and try and count the trees to make sure we've got all the trees that should be there. Usually it's the other way around.
Right.
There aren't either the wrong trees have been planted or that the trees have not been planted. So it would be unusual for us to do that. We haven't done that before.
I have a question for David Riggs.
Yeah.
Right now, the city is updating its policy for tree banking and codifying it. And please correct me if I say anything wrong here, okay? So basically what we're saying is that each tree banked is $225, right? And
Yeah,
so my question,
Chris Fall is working on some revisions to the Title 33 and Title 37, I think, for the landscaping codified ordinance, and I think that was her recommendation for the amount for the trees to be replaced. And I think that would be the cost of the tree plus the cost to install the tree, if I recall. And this was before my time here at the City of Athens, but I think that same number was talked about quite a bit with the Menards site that was and went through Shade Tree Commission. David Ingram, was that in 2017 or 2018?
Yeah, I believe so. That was Ron Lucas came up with that number.
I guess my question would be, David Riggs, is will that policy be in place and will it apply to this site? Because I think that we need to be upfront with the planners, because they will have to, if the answer is yes, they will have to decide, do they want to pay the $225 per tree, bank tree up front, or would they rather plant their own trees?
Well, I think the short answer, Roxanne, is no. I don't think that codified ordinance will be modified by the time this committee needs to make a decision. I know that there is something that's fairly vague in the existing codified ordinance that says that there may be, I don't even know if they call it tree banking or not, but there may be some provision to set aside money in lieu of planting trees, and that would be up to the Shade Tree Commission to decide how that would work. But it's not been codified. In my head, it hasn't been codified yet with any detail. And the other thing we'd have to be careful of is that once the city obtains those funds, we have to put that in a special account, and we'd have to talk to the city auditor about where that money should go. It should not go into the general fund, I don't believe.
Right, but
Well, I don't think we should rely on that for this plan, because he needs to know now. I mean, he has a right to know not what's going to happen in the future.
right.
Would it be, I appreciate that discussion, and I think for hypothetical or the future, we should definitely make that price higher, because we want to discourage tree banking. We want to encourage developers to put as many trees on their site as meet, to obviously meet their needs, but because of our city goals. $225 that's, boy, you could almost bank. No wonder they want to bank it, because it's cheaper than actually planting one. But
Right.
hypothetically. But what about for a question for the folks doing this? There's no trees along the pond, and I'm wondering, and I know views are important. I'm wondering if something aesthetically could be done to frame the views and to, of course, address stormwater and maybe habitat for aquatic wildlife. Some of the birds and the bees and other little things that apartment dwellers might enjoy watching.
This is Tom Simons from WODA Construction.
Thank you, Tom.
Oh, we don't own the pond. The pond that you see there, the existing pond there, is not part of the property that's being purchased here. So we really can't go on to their property and plant trees around their pond in that area.
I guess it looks like
just
your
the
property
side where the
line-
building is.
Yeah, it's your
Like-
property line is pretty close to the pond, though, and is far enough away from the building that it would be in alignment with our ordinance.
I thought if you wanted to scrunch more trees in there, forgive me, is it, I've forgotten your name. It's not John White. Like it's showing up.
Mark Schieber, I'm sorry.
Mark,
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
That's fine. That's fine. I tried to correct it earlier and figure out why I did that, but I couldn't. So I apologize.
I mean, you might not get some large trees in there because of the distance to the building, but some small, medium trees might work
Yep.
well.
It would have to be that based on the specifications and the standards. We had a few more, a little bit tighter and closer, but there were some issues in terms of being too close or too tight in there and dealing with the property line. So we removed a few of those.
I can't see the scale, so I apologize. I didn't know what is the distance from the.
Well, Anne, you can, if you can gauge it off the parking lot, the parking spaces are 9 feet wide.
Oh, gotcha. Yes. Yeah.
So you could take that. So
Oh, I feel like you could scrunch some in there.
we could scrunch a few in there. Yes, we could. Is there any reason, Tom, that we couldn't add a couple in maybe the sort of southwest corner? And I don't know if we can get one or two more to the.
Mark, if your plan wants to include those, I don't see an issue. Chuck Garvik's on, our engineer. Chuck, are there any utility concerns right there, or trees okay? Hey, Mark, if you can fit them, I'm all for it. I got no issue with that. You didn't draw them in there, so I thought there was a reason.
Right. Well, we had them a little bit in the beginning. Building moved around a bit, so we tried to accommodate in certain areas, but we were also getting tight in some of our movement up against that building, so we stayed back. But I think we can pinch that a little bit more in there and add a number of several more trees in through there. So, be more than glad to look at that.
I think I'll summarize for the committee, and the committee can tell me where I'm getting it wrong, is that right now we're codifying the cost of bank trees that will not be in place when we approve this plan. However, the committee does have the philosophy that fewer bank trees is better. And I think you can hear that. So if we feel that, you're making a good faith effort, then that's what the negotiation is going to be.
Okay.
This is Chuck Garvick. If I could, I don't know if anybody can hear me or not.
Chuck, you're a little light, but
Okay. How about now? Is that better?
Not much.
Okay. My only concern with the additional trees there at that location along the pond is I'm never a big fan of planting trees in a pond embankment, especially when the pond is a quote unquote wet pond, when it permanently holds water. Roots, over time, roots will deteriorate pond embankments, and it's a practice that we typically discourage. But Mark, there may be some areas back there where we can keep it far enough away from the embankment where we can get some medium-sized trees, and I'll work with you on that.
okay. Yeah, if you would do that. I think up in that northwest corner area, I think I could look and see that we could fit a number of trees up in there and still maintain our distance from the pond, I think.
He's similar to the other end.
Yes, more similar to that, Joe.
I have a question for Ann. And I thought that trees on a bank would actually hold the soil. And so I'm a little confused about the idea that a tree there would be a negative for the bank.
I never want to argue with civil engineers.
Okay, all right.
I mean, we could debate. This meeting would be a lot longer.
Okay,
But
all right.
also, I'm assuming this is going to be excavated. So none of this is going to be virgin soil at this stage. That changes.
Okay.
That's part of the problem in that.
Okay.
I think you dealt with it right there, Ann. It's all fresh. And so
Mhm.
this root system and the trees being along an embankment there are probably going to have an impact.
Right, but that's a whole, that's a whole different story. If it's a new bank, it's not the same at all. So.
Exactly.
Takes 100 years to build an inch of soil in Ohio, but about 10 minutes for a engineer to get his hands on it. Just kidding. Just joking.
Yeah, just to clarify where we are with the tree banking, the particular part of Title 37, 370103 Part E says if the specific application of the landscape requirements will seriously limit the functions of the site, the Tree Commission shall have authority to permit consolidation and/or relocation of these landscape requirements elsewhere within the site or to a public park or right of way within the city. And we've interpreted that but this is partly why Chris Fowles trying to get this codified. We have said that there are two ways to meet this requirement. One is the owner can, under their cost, plant these trees elsewhere with the permission of the city in a public park or right of way. Or they can pay a fee to the city. And that was where the Menards discussion was dealt with. And the 200 and whatever it was dollars per tree came from. So we have at the moment, the choice. And I think Menards are going to go with this idea that they will buy the trees and plant them themselves rather than pay the city to do it. So that's the state of play on that. And to get permission to, as we just generally call it, bank trees or operate this particular part of Title 37, the Tree Commission policy is that we would need 2/3 of the Tree Commission members present in the meeting to approve this action, because the action will cause the city to finish up owning these trees and having to maintain them. And so this is reducing the obligation on the owner to maintain the trees that should have been planted on their property. So that's why we have a somewhat higher barrier for the approval of that part of any plan that requires, as I say, banking of trees.
With that being said, I would be willing to approve it given the circumstances.
Okay. What do we feel about waiting until later, so we've had time to have a look at these plans and make sure we understand them before we give any sort of approval? And I'd like to get some idea from the other tree commissioners where they are. As I say, I only saw these plans this evening. I'm not sure even if they were sent to any other of the tree commissioners. They may have only been sent to me. David Riggs, I think you were the one who sent it out. Did you send it to all the tree commissioners or just to me?
No, sir. I just sent that. I just got it and sent it to you.
Okay. Well, I would like then to forward these, have a chance to forward these on to the other tree commissioners before we make a decision. Now, in terms of timelines, where are we in the process? Can we afford to delay this decision until our next meeting, which would be April the 8th, or will we have to have an interim meeting somewhere? Again, I'm putting this to David Riggs. Give me some ideas.
Sure. So the next, I think this plan will go back to the Planning Commission on April the 1st. And they'll need to make a determination at that time. I know historically, if the shade tree hasn't come up with or hasn't made a determination, hasn't had time to look at everything, they will approve the plans contingent upon additional comments from the Shade Tree Commission. I don't know how the committee feels about that, but I think unless there's some significant issues at the April 1st meeting with Planning Commission, they're obligated to make a determination one way or another on this Title 41.
So I think if I'm hearing you right, they could wait for us to make our decision on April the 8th then. Is that correct?
Yes, if the committee is comfortable with that, they could approve contingent upon comments or final approval from the Shade Tree Commission.
Okay, which committee are you referring to? The Planning Commission or us?
Yes,
okay. Well, if you can, I mean, if necessary, we could have an additional meeting. I think that would be possible. But I don't feel comfortable approving plans tonight in the light of the fact I've only just had these in my hands, and the other commissioners haven't seen them yet, other than what they can see on my screen.
Yeah. Could I raise a point, David? Just looking at the screen, there's this large central area where it looks like it's a parking lot.
It is.
And there is a large central portion of that with no trees. Mm-hmm. There are trees at what must be the north end and south end and over on the west. And since when the ordinance was written, I thought, my understanding was that we wanted shade over a parking area. So we wanted that shade to be cooling, but I feel like we're getting away from that by not having more trees in the parking lot. Mm-hmm. Particularly since they're trying to squeeze trees in other places when we've got this whole parking. We've got a fair amount of the parking lot that is not shaded.
Mm-hmm. Mark, do you want to comment on that?
We've packed in all we can within the islands that are available. It's probably more of an issue which maybe Chuck should address a little bit relative to the parking and the requirements that he's got relative to the site and parking and its relationship to the units. Chuck, would you care to address that a bit?
Yeah, you're right, Mark. It's, zoning ordinance requires us to have a certain amount of parking spaces per unit and per type of unit, and we are right on the number in this development for parking spaces.
Yeah, but I sort of feel like the parking spaces have been determined by one, and that though they take precedent over the trees when the plans were made. I don't understand why that couldn't be accommodated. I mean, if you know that there need to be more tree islands, then that should be put in. We've just had other projects where people said, well, yes, well, we don't have it, but, look at the constraints of it. But if they had started that with initially, then it would have been possible. So that's why I'm a little sensitive on this.
As long as we're talking about this, and I get what Mark explained earlier about the snow plows and the maintenance, I remember some of our early developments, that were complying with the ordinance that has evolved over time and changed. But when there were trees on the edges, and again, I don't want to, because you probably have reasons for doing this, but the trees on the edges tended to get hit and the curbing got damaged because moving vans and bigger vehicles, and, even with apartments, I move my kids out, bring my truck and horse trailer and can't make the turn, and you clip the side of a tree. I don't know how you would do it, but that's where I think Mark comes in to design, maybe make them, perpendicular to the cars, longer islands. You actually save on concrete that way. You actually get a little more soil volume. You see it a lot in some of the bigger cities, but it's just something to think about. And I'm sure there's a reason why you guys have this. I just wanted to share that.
And if the tree islands are not at the end, I can see there's a certain symmetry there. But if the tree islands are moved in on either end, then you're actually going to get more shading. More cars will be shaded because, it's nice to have the street or where the cars are going shaded, but people really like to park under the shade in the summer. So by moving those islands in, you get more shaded spots.
And did you guys do it maybe as like a traffic calming? Because it does direct the traffic.
So the outer loop of the parking was established basically for emergency vehicle radius points to make the loop. Also, in practice with these type of developments, we usually put the curb islands at the ends to, number one, to direct traffic, so we don't have people cutting through our parking areas. And also, it also protects that green space. So if we were to pick up those islands and move them in, we would have to replace those islands with parking stalls to still meet the zoning code. And then that car at the end of the parking run is now vulnerable to an emergency vehicle making that turn or a garbage truck making that turn. Mm-hmm. So that's pretty much why we try to keep our islands at the end of the parking stalls.
Yeah. You mean so places like Kroger's where there are no trees and those parking spaces at the end. So were those requirements changed after places like the Kroger's parking lot was built?
Well, Kroger's parking lot typically has an emergency fire lane in front of the building for direct pull up for the emergency crews to have assistance inside. Also, they don't have the garbage trucks running in and out of their parking stalls like we're going to have at this location here.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I guess Lee's question gets to one of my concerns as well, and it sort of addresses this point about the, having to bank because we will seriously limit the functions of the site if we require the trees to be there. It comes back to a planning piece that by essentially dedicating more of this area of this site to the parking lot, you would then have the space available within the parking lot for additional trees and their shading. And so by choosing to have a parking lot of this size, you then limit the possibility for those islands to be put in. I mean, I understand the parking requirement. I mean, that's clearly there. But if this parking lot was bigger, then it could have accommodated more tree islands. And I'm not asking you to redraw it now, but I'm getting to Lee Gregg's point that these constraints are known right at the beginning, and therefore it's a little bit disappointing that people can't plan to be able to accommodate the trees better than we actually do.
Well, and it does relegate that those trees on the end are never going to do what we really want to need them to do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're going to be hit by the garbage trucks and the parents with their trailers, you know, moving the kids in and out and stuff. It's just I guess a function of.
Well, as I say, I don't have any problems with those trees at the two ends of that central piece. I would just like to see some more tree islands within the parking lot. And as I say, I can understand the constraint they're now faced with in terms of the design. But going back to Lee's point, that if you start out with a plan that it does allow for trees to be planted within a parking lot, yes, you've got a physically larger area now being occupied by your parking lot on the site, and maybe that poses other questions, but it's just a whole design aspect that seems to be missed when people are designing these parking lots, because as Lee said, people like to park under trees. They like the shade that these trees provide. But the designers of these buildings and parking lots don't seem to want to accommodate that within the design itself.
Well, it's not only that; it saves the asphalt, and it shades the buildings, or it can help shade the buildings. I mean, there are lots of it helps with the drainage. It's a lot of things that the trees do, and being part of the parking area is a positive in many ways.
Yeah. Okay, so I will circulate copies of these plans to you. You need to be paying attention to the number of trees and so on. It looks like the concern that Roxanne and I both identified with the area has now been addressed within the information on the landscape plan itself, which is good. We need to go through and count up all the trees and make sure that the numbers make sense, because that's part of our job, is to validate what we're being given. Is there anything further on this particular plan, the Tyler Park plan, that people have got questions about? Because we still have the Kershaw one to have a look at. Okay, I will try and switch to the other plan. Let me see if I can do that. Let me see, where are we? Should be here. Kershaw Green, yes, there we are. Right, so Kershaw Green. So now you should have the Kershaw Green plan. I'm going to try and blow this one up as well, so it's a bit larger. Again, I can see in the legend down here that that was a big change. I didn't mean to do that much of a change. Let me try and maybe it's not going to let me do it. No, it's still going to do one or the other. I can see now in this region here that the area of the right-of-way has now been included in the removed from the overall calculation, and now the property area outside the right-of-way is matching the sum of the impermeable and permeable surfaces.
Correct.
This one has a similar issue, I think, in terms of total number of trees. It is obviously a similar design property as well. You can see the building structures and the parking lots look very similar. Are there any comments you want to make, Mark, about this plan? That
I think this one is, you can see, is even a little tighter than the other one.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, the open area and maybe wanting to plant on some banks is not available to us. Once again, we have a large stormwater retention detention basin area.
Yeah.
So that we've gotten right within the edge lines of that to add to our tree count, but really are probably starting to push the proximity of how into that area we need to be able to go.
Okay.
And we're open on the south side because we have a drainage line going through there and we have minimal distance to the property line. So somewhat the similar thing that we're dealing with on the opposite side of the pond.
Okay. What are the constraints over these stormwater detention areas? Because there are trees that you can certainly plant into those areas that will tolerate the flooding for a few days, may even help with the absorption of water in those areas. Are there some particular civil engineering issues that require trees not to be planted in there?
Chuck?
So my comment earlier about not planting trees on embankments was referring specifically to embankments of ponds that hold water. I agree, and I apologize, I forget who it was that mentioned it, but I agree with her that trees are a great way to stabilize steep slopes. But when you add water pressure behind that slope, tree and tree roots within that embankment is a bad combination. So having said that, the stormwater detention areas that we've proposed for both Tyler and Kershaw are temporarily wet ponds. So they hold the water for a certain number of hours and allow it to drain down.
Mm-hmm.
And as you can see, Mark has provided some trees along that embankment on this plan here.
Yeah. Okay.
We've worked our way partially down into the edge of it, but not far. There's a lot of grading in that area, in that pond. Mm-hmm. So there's quite a bit of slope issues there. So we've sort of tried to stabilize the upper areas and the ridge line.
Yeah.
Is what we kind of focused on.
So those are, if I'm reading this right, those are 1 foot contour lines on the around the detention area.
Correct.
Okay.
Is the reason that the trees are not scrunched together, is that because of our some of it's written in the code about not having them more than 15 foot apart and that kind of thing? It
is. And we talked to David, and there are a few of those areas that don't meet exactly that. And, they're not as all in that perfect form. I think that's way too perfect, but it was part of your guidelines in order to ensure that you get good coverage. And I understand that. But as a whole, we've followed that as the underlying guideline for the planting of those trees. So that's why you see that distribution.
One way you can reduce your banking requirements is to ask us to relax that 30-foot constraint, because we are certainly willing to do that. So if you wanted to plant more trees, and if that would cause them, say, to be planted 20 feet apart rather than 30 feet apart, that's certainly something that we would consider as a possibility, or we have.
It would also, sorry to interrupt, David. Plant, 15, even, I've seen 12-foot centers. It's easier to maintain too. You get more coverage quicker, so you have less grass competition and, easier to maintain. And the trees do tend to do better over time. If you have great species selection. I love that. It's just a thought.
I I'd be more than glad to do that. Really sort of wanted to do a bit of that from the beginning. That's why I say we've kind of pushed them in a little bit in some areas, but we could do some more of that.
Okay, well, if you'd be willing to do that, I think that would certainly ease my concerns about banking trees on this. As I say, this is one area where we can give you permission to vary away from the requirement. The other one, and I don't know whether this is relevant or not, and this is a David Riggs question, but in the past we have allowed people to meet the requirements by planting trees in the right of way. That's adjacent to their property. But I don't know whether that's appropriate in this particular case or not.
Yeah, Mr. Ingram, I would go back to that same general Title 370103, where the Shade Tree Commission does have the authority to allow right-of-way trees planted in the city limits. So you do have that ability. If you wanted to do that, it would be entirely up to the committee.
Well, I'm not sure it's actually that bit I was referring to. I'm trying to look at the ordinance in front of me at the moment, but
there are difficulties in planning out in this right of way. You have utilities out there.
Yeah, that's
which really compound the whole thing based on your code issues and standard practice around utilities. So.
Yeah,
I think there's some new utilities that are going in there. There's a high volume gas line, I think, that's getting ready to go in there too. So we'd have to be careful about timing. You don't want to plant a bunch of trees just to have them removed out of the right of way.
Right.
With a utility coming through.
Yeah, it's the particular requirement. It comes under residential landscaping 370108. It says trees for this requirement may also be used to meet this requirement may be placed in the right of way with the consent of the tree commission. So that is another possible location. If you've got an adjacent right of way and you want to meet your requirement by putting trees in that right of way, then obviously utilities and all the other bits and pieces that you have to consider with this, but that is another way to get more trees on the site itself rather than, or adjacent to the site, rather than having to bank trees.
But David, just as a point of clarification, so we hopefully can expedite this process so they don't have to come back to us multiple times, is, if I'm hearing you correctly, the Shade Tree Commission is willing to say that if it is deemed prudent that they can plant in the right of way, we are giving them permission. Am I correct?
Yes. On both of these aspects, unless I hear somebody object to this evening, I'm suggesting that this is a possibility for these plans, a distinct possibility, because we have done this in the past. We have reduced the spacing to enable more trees to be planted on the property, and we have also allowed, as we can under Title 37, for trees to be planted in the adjacent right of way, again, in order to meet the tree requirements of the particular property itself, thereby reducing or reducing the number of possible bank trees.
Okay, David, and just another point of clarification. So the answer is yes. At their discretion, we are giving them permission.
Yep.
The second question is, what do we consider a minimum tolerance from tree to tree distance? So they will have that during their calculation. I don't want them to start placing trees and then we come back and we say, you've done it too close. So what is the variance that we are allowing them to have for these projects?
We've allowed 20 feet in the past that I remember, and I think would allow us to plant them even closer than that. And she is
I'm a scruncher, but I do think I think, Mark is a professional landscape architect. I mean, you can see that he clearly knows what he's doing. So I don't, it looks like this is, I don't see them doing that. But 15 or 20 foot is fair, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Just to give
Okay, what we're saying is that we would not question if they place trees within 15 feet. As long as they're greater than 15 feet, that is an acceptable limit for these two projects. Am I correct?
I would go with that, yes. Yeah.
Okay,
That's
just
very
want to make
helpful.
sure that Mark has every clarification he needs to do this.
Yep.
Thank you. And I appreciate the open book there in dealing with the right of way. We've put quite a few trees, at least as best we could, based on spacing requirements and building and so forth, and the right of way and setback requirements. So if you look at that frontage all along South Plains Road there for Kershaw, or for Kershaw here, especially, you can see we've got it reasonably filled in to other than within that immediate right-of-way space. But if you look in there, right in the middle of that right-of-way space are the electric poles, and then gas is being run out there further back. So we're kind of in between these things. We kind of sandwiched and settled ourselves around in there almost the best we could without really be stretching to try to do something else out there.
Okay.
Is my feeling.
Well, just so you'll know that our main goal for you is to get as many trees in the ground and not in the bank.
Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Yep. And so going back to, I think the question that occurred over Tyler was about any trees that you managed to preserve on the site. Again, that's always a difficult question as to whether that would reduce the banking requirement. But if there are ways in which we can preserve trees, we're always interested in trying to do that, because they're going to give shade for much quicker than anything that you planned.
Historically, we try to look, and we did have a pretty thorough discussion at WODA regarding trying to do that. We're running too many risks just because there's so much grading that goes on to be able to really feel that we comfortably could guarantee good surviving trees.
Yeah.
So that was part of the problem. It's not that there probably will be some, but it was just not knowing where they, what might or might not survive in there. So the discussion was there, and if we can, we'll talk about it again. If we can, obviously, I'd like to have them. If there are, let's say, 36-inch trees, there might be a couple of them down in there. If those are saved, is this a 1-for-1 tree exchange, or do you end up with 3 trees for represents 3 large trees if you're saving a 36 or 42-inch?
As long as the species is a large shade tree, and as long as they're not too close together, then we would just count them on a 1-for-1 basis.
1-for-1. Okay.
Yeah.
But they need to be trees that aren't going to be damaged by construction. If they're away from heavy equipment, because once the compacting happens, then we don't know how long they'll survive. So.
Understood. Yeah.
So that's why I really like your approach of not making any assumption about how many trees are going to be left there after it all is said and done.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions on this one or comments?
Joe or Ann or Tom or Chuck? Any concerns or comments that you have that haven't been dealt with properly there, or that you think need to be mentioned?
I have one comment. This is Tom again. And just so the commission knows, absolutely, we want to save every tree that we can. And not just to get credit in the bank. We didn't want to overpromise and underdeliver. That's why, we're very careful with that calculation. We're not going to nickel and dime on trees that we save. We want to save the trees. One, they're expensive, not banking them, but bigger, mature trees there towards the creek bank we want to keep as many of those trees as we possibly can. So I just want you to know we feel the same way as you do. We're going to do everything we can to save as many trees as possible. I just wanted to share that.
You.
Good.
Thanks. That's awesome. We do all want to save them. It is a challenge, and I'm assuming you guys probably have access to the latest BMPs and the tree protection resources that are out there. But if you don't, all you got to do is get me your email address, and there's just some wonderful resources. They're easy, low-tech ways that you can work around valuable trees. And, if you want those, let me know.
Thanks, Anne. Is there anything else on these two properties? I guess one question I've got for Mark is how quickly do you think you could do some of the revisions that we've just been talking about?
I would say we could probably have something to you by the end of next week.
Good.
Is that timely enough?
I think so, because if we hear back from the Planning Commission that they want us to make our decision before they meet, which I think David said was the 1st of April, then we'd have a window in which we could hold a special meeting just for this project.
Okay.
So that will work. Yes. Yep.
Good. Well, we'll target having you something by the end of next week at the latest. So
very good. Very good.
And Anne and Joe, I want to make sure you take a review of that as we go through that, obviously, so that we can get that down there to them.
And if you've got questions in the meantime, feel free to just contact me, and I'll try and clarify things. And I'll make sure I copy any of that to David Riggs in the process.
Yes. What would be the best way to get a hold of you, David?
My email is d3ingram@gmail.com.
At gmail.com, you said?
Yep.
Thank you. Excellent. Appreciate it. And, we'll get those to you, and thank you for your time and input.
Okay, very good. I look forward to getting them.
Okay.
Thanks.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you.
Thank you. Thank you for all your input.
Okay, let's go back to our agenda. We're getting quite
David?
later. Yes?
Can we request that our guests sign off at this point?
Well, it is a public meeting.
Oh, that's true. It's true. It's just usually
They can hang around as long as they like.
That's all right. I'm signing off. I'm just trying to find my buttons. Thank you.
I apologize.
Goodbye.
When people join us publicly, David, though, do they have the ability to speak, or is it just that they're listening?
I believe I can invite them to speak, and then Ryan will turn them on.
Oh, okay. Okay. That's, I apologize. I thought that they were just observers and not participants.
Yeah. Yeah, I really don't understand the details of how they set up these meetings, so I'm a little bit.
I'd like to address a question.
Yeah.
Regarding all this, which really it bothers me quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Without a policy in place for banking.
Well, we have a policy in place for banking. It's we have our policy. What we don't have is anything in the code.
Okay, so what is our policy for banking?
Let me find it. Bear with me for a moment, because I'll have to dig into my.
Our problem, Roxanne, is that we didn't have a mechanism, but hopefully that's going to be sorted out.
Oh, it will be. I'm going to make it my life's work. Good.
Okay, I'm going to share this document if I can figure it out. It's this.
I spoke with the mayor, and the mayor is very interested in us understanding this a little bit better.
Well, it would help if
a little bit more in a minute why.
it would help if the council people involved would actually consult with us and with the representative of council on this committee.
Yeah.
But, anyway, at the top there, you said that this is a policy that was adopted by the Tree Commission in order to try and implement this thing. And it quotes there the particular section of the code in A, and then the procedure is that 2/3 of the members eligible to vote. So the reason for stating it that way is that we have 5 full-time members and 2 alternates. And so depending on who is present and so on, because quite often the alternates are present, if there were 5 full-time members present, the alternates wouldn't be eligible to vote. So it would be 2/3 of that 5 would have to vote in favour of this. And it does talk about including the possibility of allowing trees to be planted closer together or closer to buildings than is given in Title 37, and so on.
My real question, David, unless you want to go through everything for everybody, is it says the owner will pay to the city a fee for each large tree.
Yep.
And so I was like, okay, what's the fee?
Exactly. We have no power to set that fee.
Okay. And so, but I guess right now, if we're not going to have the policy in place that says $225, then what do those developers with whom we just spoke think that they are going to pay for bank trees?
Well, the way that prior to what Chris Fall was doing, the way it was supposed to work is that the code office would work with the service safety director to deal with the number one, a price, and number 2, the administration of the funds. But that was never done.
Okay. Well, okay. I would suggest that prior to us approving the plans for these 2 sites, that we either have it in policy that it's $225, or we have it in writing with these companies that it's going to cost $225 per tree.
Again, I don't know how we do that at the moment. I'd have to get David Riggs' advice on that one.
David, can you speak to that? Because honestly, why would we approve a plan if we don't have that?
Yeah, so we've actually, the city has actually not done, as far as I know, a tree bank where we have accepted money from a developer in lieu of installing or planting trees on the site. Menards had an odd agreement where they agreed to give the city a certain number of trees, but there wasn't a dollar amount associated with that, and that was an agreement, I think, between the city and Menards. I don't know that the shade tree wasn't involved in that. Were they? Do you remember that? I wasn't here for that, so I don't know.
Yeah, we never gave final approval to the Menards plan.
So the Roxanne. So we've not done that for any project that I know of. I believe that the information that David Ingram has here, you could do that, but I don't know whether you would come up with a value per tree, a cost per tree, or if that would come through from a city recommendation. I don't know.
It would seem to me, David, and I might be wrong, if we go with $225, which is what council is suggesting to put in the policy, then that is appropriate. But the problem is that the policy will not be in place.
That's correct. Yeah.
Prior. So therefore, I would suggest that we need to have additional language as part of the contract with this company that is the cost.
Well, we could state that in our approval.
Yes.
For example,
I didn't mean to step on you, David. I would maybe recommend that you have some kind of an agreement letter, and it could be between the developer and the Shade Tree Commission, or the developer and the city, that there's an agreement, a written agreement that gets signed by the mayor and or the Shade Tree Commission and the developer. I think that would be the cleanest way to do this. Mr. Ingram, I didn't know what you thought about that. Does that sound
I'm fine with it. Anything that we can come up with that's an official instrument, I am in favour of, because it was one of my goals when you can see that this was done in 2012. So this has been hanging around for almost 10 years, that we've been trying to get the city to come up with procedures, and I think you've just given us a possible procedure that we can follow, certainly in the meantime, but eventually, hopefully, we will get the city code changed to
I have
enable
one
us.
more caveat for that letter. That $225, a time frame needs to be settled when it is paid.
I agree.
And somebody needs to decide what that time frame is. I would say it's upfront.
Well,
however that is defined.
Yeah, the only issue there is that if we're going to do this negotiation of, well, if you leave these trees and they're still there at the end, then you won't have to bank these trees. Then
they get credit. They get it back.
They get it back. Okay, I don't know what David Rigsfield feels about that one.
We do have a little bit of money in the general fund for reimbursements. This has to do with accounting and the city auditor. It's really hard to take in money and then give it back out. It's just a procedure that I found it's kind of difficult.
David, maybe you want to say 75% up front, 25% at X date, so that way, the 25% will probably cover.
Okay.
Whatever it is, but recently I have been talking with the mayor, and the mayor has big plans for trees, and he's aware of Menards, the 300 trees. And what we have found is that Menards is responsible for supplying 2-inch trees. They do not pay for them. They do not maintain them. They do not cage them. And it is not clear at this point whether the city has the resources or the funds to plant trees. So, being the blunt person that I am, I went to Steve. I hear you. You've given us 3 areas of priority for plantings, and I can discuss that in a minute. But now you're telling me that you might not be able to pay for them or maintain them. And I'm like, don't spin our wheels. We're not going to come up with plans if you can't pay for them. And so there's got to be a mechanism by which this city has funds to plant trees.
Mm-hmm. And maintain them.
And maintain them, yes. And so, David, what I'd like to do when we get into new business is to talk about, the mayor's vision for the 3 areas so Tree Commission can hear it. But one of the questions, I don't know if it's you or probably Andrew, but somebody's got to decide, do we even have any resources to even consider any of these plantings? Mm-hmm. I hope I'm not being unfair. But I just want us to feel like if we come up with a plan that we have the resources to follow through on them.
So are you talking about Menards planting? Because my understanding was that they were going to provide the trees and the plantings.
That is incorrect. They are only paying for the trees. We had clarification on that from David Riggs.
Oh.
Yes, so that is a problem. David, is it appropriate to go into new business or not yet?
Well, let's finish up first. Let me stop sharing this thing. Let me get back to the agenda. We've got, we could actually deal with this under the next item, because the next item on the agenda is, if I can put the agenda back up, is plans, maintenance of the tree canopy.
Okay.
And so we can discuss that, what you're talking about under this. And by the sound of it, we're getting into a chicken and egg situation that we don't have any definite plans at the moment. I answered some questions at the last meeting as to how many trees we want to plant, and I said 20 more than we remove. That's been my goal in the past, and that's what I would put into the plan. But I'd be interested to hear what you think the mayor is thinking of in terms of planting trees.
Okay, so specifically, each of us was tasked to go through our neighborhoods and come up with plans. And Ann Bonner and I have been making a plan for West State based on the committee's recommendations. And right now, it seems like between 20 and 30 large trees and medium trees could be placed there. There's also a plot of land up in the south neighborhood. When they did the plantings in Carroll Road, there was a property that was left open that was donated to the city. It's 0.4 acres. It's contiguous with woods. It's in the mayor's neighborhood as well as my neighborhood. And we spoke to Chris Knisley and I. She's head of city council, and I spoke with the neighbors, and they are welcoming of having trees in the neighborhood. And then the other priority for the mayor is 1804 Way. The trees have actually been planted by the university. Steve was asking whether or not it would make sense to have additional plantings, but at this point, it does not seem that it's large tree planting, so it probably would not be within the purview of the tree commission. It would probably be a part of Athens and Bloom. So the mayor started with 3 priority areas. We're probably down to 2 that would cover us. Mm-hmm. The thought is that we would use them trees from Menards. The issue, though, is that in the West State Street area, as well as on the south side, we have deer. And so there are significant costs for not only putting the trees in, but also caging them and maintaining them. And so my question to the mayor was, who's going to pay for this? And that's when we got into a bit of a chicken and an egg conversation, David, as you said, where, we're going to have, this issue with $225 being banked. I said, that's great. That will help us with future plantings, but how are we going to ever use the bank that we have with Menards? Do we have a budget? And so I was instructed by him by the mayor to come back to the committee to see whether or not the committee wanted to move forward with these 2 ideas. If so, I think rather than coming up with a plan for those areas, what we can do is just say generally each of those areas can take between 20 and 30 trees. Mm-hmm. And if that's true, how much money does the city have? And are they willing to maintain those trees in those 2 areas? And that's a question to Andrew Chicky. And it turns out that I will be with him and the mayor tomorrow at an Athens and Bloom meeting. So I guess the question to the committee is, would you like me to have a conversation with Andrew Chicky that basically asks how much money is the city willing to pay for planting and maintaining trees this year?
Yeah, could I ask you,
Mm-hmm.
is there a plan for any other area than those 2 areas?
There could be a plan, Nancy. That was just what the mayor declared as his priorities. It doesn't mean that we have to do what are his priorities.
It was his priority because somebody mentioned it to him, but I don't think.
Well, West State, I think, has been on his radar for a while, and the place on the south side has been a problem for that neighborhood as well. They wanted to put a park in there, and the neighborhood rejected that plan a few years back. And so then we went informally to ask about trees. So I think that yes, it is because we brought them up again, but I think both of those areas were things that had been discussed prior. But I don't know that the Shade Tree Commission is really bound by what the mayor, what his priorities are. I think that
Well, it is in terms of
I
getting
wanted
money.
to know what his priorities were, is because I know if Steve says he wants it done, people around him tend to get it done.
As long as the money is involved, I think we need to all be concerned about what the mayor wants to have done, because he's going to say yes or no to the funding, and that's and the time of people to do it. I mean, he has to agree to allow city employees to do some of the work.
Well, right now he's put it squarely on Andrew's shoulders. He basically said, "This is gonna be up to Andrew."
Well, I guess what I'm saying is you said that there's space for so many trees in those two areas. That doesn't take up all of the 200 and some trees that Menards supposedly.
No, Nancy, I think what I'm telling everybody is I realistically don't think we're going to be able to plant 300 trees anytime in the near future unless we begin to have a policy that allows us to allocate funds for planting and maintenance, because that was not in the contract with Menards.
Uh-huh.
And we've been wanting to have a hard line in the budget for a long time.
Yeah.
Just to built in that we have a certain amount in the budget for planting, for maintaining, for removal.
Now,
and
I have an evil idea. You guys can tell me that it's evil. We get the trees from Menards, all 300 of them, and we have a plant sale. Seriously. And we sell them to the neighborhood, and the neighbors have to sign a contract that says they will follow the following steps to plant their trees and maintain them. We will give it to them at a discounted price of what it would normally cost them, and we bank the money.
I had a similar idea, but I wasn't thinking of selling it. I was thinking,
no, we're going to sell them, Nancy. We're making money on this, because otherwise we're not going to ever have a budget. Now, the question is can we actually do this? Menard seems to be on the hook for the trees. I don't think it says anywhere in there that we have to plant them ourselves. It probably does say that they do have to be planted in the city or something, but is there a creative way to make lemonade from lemons?
Mm-hmm. Is there a creative way to what?
Make lemonade from lemons.
Lemonade from lemons.
In other words, make good on a bad situation.
Increase our canopy cover with trees that we've sold and then gotten money for.
Yeah, and we'll make money. And I think that we could get people to sign contracts. We're going to give you a $70 tree for $50 or $30, and you just have to guarantee that you're going to plant it and take care of it. And
well, I guess we should have seen what the agreement was before we went along with it. Or I don't know, maybe we didn't go along with it. This idea that they were going to give us trees and plant them, and now it turns out we're just going to get the trees.
So I think we can use some of the trees. So back to the original question is would we like to have a discussion, and it doesn't have to be me, maybe at the next meeting we can have Andrew join us and we can ask him these questions. I don't know. Or I could just ask informally, ahead of time, and just say, okay, Andrew, how many sites do you realistically think that you can handle? And then we can, if he says I can handle one site, then we make a plan for one site. If he says 2 sites, we make a plan for 2 sites. I just don't see the benefit in us making plans if he doesn't have the resources.
I like this. I like the idea of a large opening for people to have the chance to choose a tree. I mean, that's
I think we'll get back to that discussion in a minute, Nancy, because I like it too. But
I I don't like the idea.
Permission from you guys to talk to Andrew tomorrow, just to say, hey, Andrew,
Yeah.
here's a concern. Is everybody okay with that?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
then we'll do that. Okay, so now back to the tree sale idea. Can we do that?
I mean, could we do that without the,
And I think that's a David Briggs question. Are you still on, David?
I am. I would actually defer that to our law director to see.
Yeah.
Can you bring this to the law director, say, State Tree Commission, or Blame Me has this crazy idea?
I can certainly ask the question.
Here's what makes it clear. If we just say, the trees are now available and they belong to the city. So can the city allow the residents to purchase them? I don't see anything illegal about that. But anyway, I mean, isn't that what we're going to do? Isn't that what we're asking?
Well, I think it's two-part, Nancy. Is one, can we take trees from Menards and sell them? And the answer might be maybe, if we mandate that they are planted within city property, because there might be something in the original contract that says that the city has to plant the trees. And then the second question, the follow-up would be, okay, if we have to mandate that they're planted, will legal give us a contract that people have to sign when they get the trees?
Yeah, you're assuming there was a contract?
I believe that there was a contract, yes, because I've read part of it. David shared some of the language from it.
Oh.
Not this David, the other David.
David Briggs.
Is he still there? Are you there, David?
Yes. Yeah, I'm still here. If I recall, I think I sent that, at least some of that info to some of the committee here.
You sent it to me and I shared it with David.
With Menard. I could get that again if Mr. Ingram is inclined. I can get that to him and he can pass it along to everybody.
Yes, if you could.
Just in general, what did it say?
There are 370 trees that Menards has agreed to supply to the city of Athens. And I believe it's in a certain amount of, there's a certain time limit on it, but there's 370 trees of 2-inch, it's called DBH, diameter at breast height.
Right.
And I think it's a species that the species has to be approved by the Shade Tree Commission. I believe that's the case. Yeah. I'll get the details and get them.
Do you think they might be waiting for us to tell them what we want?
Yeah, or hoping that we never ask for them.
Right. We haven't asked for anything yet. Yeah.
And I thought the plan was, or our thinking was, that we don't try to plant them all in 1 year. I mean, well, assuming that we could, but rather that these be planted over a period of time, staggered, so that we don't have 370, whatever it is, trees that will be reaching the end of their lifespan all within a short time period. So
I think if you're planting in a single area, that absolutely, could make sense, Lee. But I guess what I'm concerned about is, when does that promissory note expire?
Exactly.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, that is a question. But when we were talking about it, back when we were discussing it, Ann Bonner brought up that point. And even though the trees, but absolutely right, the trees are spread all over the city, it may not make that much difference. But I have a feeling that we're going to have to do this within a short time frame, like 2 or 3 years, or else these things have a way of not happening.
Okay, well,
Exactly.
You've heard my brother. I mean, we find out what we can afford to plant, and we plant, and the rest of it we sell, and we make money.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we sell at a cost that the neighbors the people in the neighborhoods can afford. I think that's important.
Nancy, absolutely. I'm thinking at least a 50% discount, but still $30 a tree, I'll take it.
Yeah.
That would give us something, whatever it is, we would have to decide what that number is. But
I'm trying to think how big the trees are going to be. A
They're
2-inch
2-inch diameter at breast height, so they're probably, I don't know, 6 to 8 feet.
Yes,
Yeah.
they should.
Something like
They'll
that.
be quite large trees if
They'll
they're
be
2-inch DBA.
Very heavy, very heavy.
Yes, they will be. Yes. Yeah.
There'll be a lot of hauling around.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think we've got. I'd like to move us along because we're hitting 9 o'clock now. This must be one of our record longest meetings. So if Roxanne can go to Andrew tomorrow and broach some of these questions to him, and then report back to us, I think that would be a good thing to do. I don't think there's much more we can do in terms of planning at the moment, although I still think it's a good idea, and I'm going to try and have a look at this myself, is to look at East State Street towards the intersection with 50. To see what trees could be planted along there, because I know that there are a lot of spaces left along
Quite
there.
a bit of space, yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be a great place to put some. I've done a survey of this neighbor in the Far East neighborhood,
Okay,
and there are quite a few spaces too. I didn't count them. I'll have to count them.
that's fine. Yeah, we don't need to collect them tonight, but I would like to put all these together at some point and put them into a document that we can use.
Mm-hmm.
I used your format. It's really helpful.
Yeah,
It was really
yeah.
easy.
But one of my concerns about doing it on East State Street is trying to identify places along there in the same way, because obviously you've got fairly large properties that extend with extensive fronts along there.
Yeah, we'd have to figure out how to do that.
Yeah. But I think I have a scheme for doing it, and I'll try that first and see if I like it, and then share it with you all.
So, David Riggs, have you had any recent contact with Menards? Are they still going to do this?
I have not. I think it probably would be appropriate to contact them, especially if we're interested in doing something soon.
I'm guessing, David, that we'll do something small this year because we'll probably have to just rely on the plantings that we can do. I don't think that we're thinking about a plant sale, but you might want, if a plant sale is realistic.
I think it'd be better to have fall plantings, don't you?
I don't know what their inventory is. I think that might be a really good question for you to ask, David, is there a possibility for spring or fall sales?
Yeah, exactly. And so what we may want to think first is, I'm just going to bring this up, is when do we want to plant trees? You don't want to plant them in the summertime. Spring is often a good time. Fall is a very good time to plant them.
Yeah. Fall is much better because people who don't, if we don't want to push it, people will be much better able to take care of them if they don't have to water them all summer long.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. No, fall is, for deciduous trees, fall's the time.
Well, the other point I wanted to make was that, do you guys know what 2021 is? It's the year of, I think, of the 17-year locust. And when they come, they do a significant amount of damage to young trees.
We're getting more locusts this year?
It's the, what they call it, Brood X 20. It's a 17-year locust, the ones with the red eyes, and there will be thousands of them. What they do on the branches of small trees is they create a slit. I wish Ann was here; she could be able to.
Oh, I know all about it. What did we have?
I know all about it.
Years ago, was that the 13-year cicadas?
I don't know. This is, I think, 2021, at least in a large part of Ohio, is Brood X, and that's the 17-year locust, and they come out. They'll come
We just had locust brood. What was it, 3 years ago or something like that? Or cicadas?
Nothing like this. This is like, the noise is so phenomenal you can hardly hear yourself talk.
Yeah,
this is the big one, right? Yeah.
Yeah, the 17-year one was quite bad when it occurred just after the turn of the century, which would be 2004 or something like that. Because we still have trees with the scars on them.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well,
We are not in Brood X territory.
Oh, okay.
So,
That's
yeah,
interesting.
yep, that's not us. It's Columbus
Okay.
and West. So we should be okay.
Good. Anyway, yeah, fall is the best time, I think, for this. We're really too far into spring now to think about a scheme for planting, unless Andrew's going to offer to keep things watered, because that may have to be part of your discussion with him as to exactly what does he understand by maintenance of trees.
I'm guessing that because they're stretched so thin and barely able to cover American in Bloom and all, the annual plantings, he's going to say, let's plant in fall, and then he's going to have to commit to next summer. And that will be hard enough for him.
Yeah.
But, David, I thought in the past that Mason Chambers had not only provided the trees, but he planted them and then he watered them. So although
when we have contracts with him, yes, that has been a requirement. Yeah.
Right. But I wonder if he would be willing, if there was money, if he would be willing to plant trees from Menards for us and do the maintenance. So
he's expensively.
Again,
but what I'm saying is the city has paid him before, Nancy. The city has used Mason Chambers before for planting. So
yeah.
I know he's expensive, but he does a good job and the trees survive. So.
But there doesn't seem to be any money is the problem.
Well, you're talking around in circles. Roxanne's got to ask him the question.
Yes, exactly.
And the mayor is going to be there too. So I think that we'll be able to have a good discussion. And
Good.
I'm just afraid that they're going to say zero.
Yeah.
In which case things are just on hold.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Do we want to talk about planning any more tonight, or can we move on and deal with any immediate questions and hopefully approve the minutes of the last meeting, which are extensive, as you've seen them?
Move on.
Okay, thank you. Yes. So is there any other business that we need to consider tonight? If not, I'm going to switch over to share the minutes with you, which I did try and circulate last night. So hopefully you've got copies. And I'm not seeing my share screen thing at the moment. Where have I gone? I've lost it. That's weird. Oh, here we go. I found it again. So the minutes, there we go. So these are the minutes that I sent out last night. I'll make them a little bit bigger on the screen. There we go. So we didn't have any tree permit issues at the last meeting. We had noticed that we would be receiving these two plans. We then went through a fairly extensive discussion about how we might develop a plan in abstract. This is a plan that doesn't consider costs and so on and so forth, or budgets. We divided up the city into various zones for people to have a look at. And we're already seeing the fruits of that. We've got reports back from Nancy and Roxanne about what they've done, and that's good. And that will meld with the next item, which was to figure out where we would want these trees from Menards to be planted. There was further discussion about identification of sites, and I did follow up with Andrew Chicky, and he said it was okay for me to go out and solicit an estimate or a quote for maintenance of trees. And what he told me was that that would then have to be sent on to the Engineering and Public Works Department, because that's where the maintenance of trees dwells. So I'd have to talk to Jessica Aldine, who has been very supportive of what the Tree Commission does. So we'll see what happens if I do manage to come up with some sort of estimate or quote from a maintenance company to do some pruning and lifting of some of the trees in the city.
Mhm.
What else did we do? We had a discussion about where does the 767 come from. I've documented that again in here. And there was a tree conference that Anne had told us about. I don't know if any of you were able to get to any of those meetings in the end. We had a quick review of the Title I and Title IX changes that Chris Fowle is proposing. I don't know, Roxanne, if you'll have chance to discuss with anyone about the pricing and whether that really does include a sufficient amount for maintenance of any trees that are planted in their first year. Because it was certainly the objective that when we came up with that original figure was that it would be, as I described us, having a contract with Mason, that when we have a contract with him, it's to plant pay for the tree, plant the tree, and maintain the tree for a year, because otherwise we want a 1-year warranty on them, and that's our way of getting the 1-year warranty to work.
I think that the $225 is just so dependent on how you plant the trees. If it's one here and one a couple blocks away, it's not cost effective. But if you're talking about planting them in tighter groupings in a smaller area, then all of a sudden $225 can make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like for me to reach out to Chris Fowle and to find out how they came up with that number, but also what are the timelines for getting that policy approved?
Yes, please do.
Okay.
Because I don't have time at the moment. I'm in the middle of scheduling a whole bunch of stuff at work.
Yeah.
Including a move of many people from one building to another.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you going to the Heritage?
Now, this is the people who are in the east wing of Clippinger are being relocated to Linley when the renovations start.
Linley? Oh,
yep. Yeah, they're not happy, some of them.
Yeah, I don't blame them. Yeah, I'll be happy to check with Chris.
Very good. Thank you. So, are there any questions about items on the minutes at all?
Oh. Let's approve them.
Okay, so I have a motion to approve from, was that Nancy?
Yes.
Thank you.
A second.
Thank you, Roxanne. Any further discussion on the minutes? If not, are there any objections to approving the minutes? Hearing none, we have minutes of our last meeting. And our next meeting will be April the 8th, unless we hear to the contrary from the David Riggs and the Planning Commission that they need us to meet before their meeting.
Yeah. And David?
Yep.
I will not be able to attend. That's
okay.
Expo Day.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
It's all right. So as I said, the next meeting will be April the 8th at 7 p.m. on Zoom.